Welcome to Luminescence Common Sense Spirituality, a show designed to share spiritual insights with you so that you can comprehend the universe and how it functions. You are about to experience raised consciousness. This is a place where spiritual principles are shared with the goal of assisting you to expand your understanding of both the seen and unseen worlds. Luminescence Common Sense Spirituality helps you to discern the timeless truths handed down from wise sages through the ages, from the airy-fairy nonsense that is being taught today. Now, here is your host, Lynn Wyeth.
Welcome to Luminescence Common Sense Spirituality. This is the radio show that disseminates esoteric knowledge and common sense spirituality. I'm Lynn Wyeth, creator of Namology Science, the ability to know all about a person's personality and the soul's purpose simply from a person's name. Now, the beautiful inspirational music you just heard is the beginning of the song called Shine by Dee Lemure. And you know that we always end our show with her beautiful, beautiful music. And if you'd like to hear more of her music, you can go to dlemore.com. It's DLEMOR.com. And I'm so grateful that she lets me use her music. Our topic today is, how does astrology fit into a spiritual path? What are the benefits of astrology, and what can astrology tell us? Where did it originate? Is astrology generic or highly specific? Is astrology a guide to our lives, or can people ignore it? How powerful is it? Why does it work? What are the most important aspects of astrology? The sun, the moon, where Mars is located? What's most important? And then there's some esoteric questions about astrology that I'd like to throw in there at the end. And our wonderful special guest today is Sandy Anastasi. She's back with us. Now, Sandy's been a professional psychic and astrologer since 1979. She holds a Bachelor of Science degree from Adelphi University and has teaching certifications in several fields. In addition to teaching, Sandy has worked as a safety engineer and owned her own small bookstore for many years before retiring to become a full-time psychic counselor, writer, and teacher. Now, Sandy's writings include books on astrology, the Kabbala, and the Tarot, as well as psychic development. She's internationally known. Those of you that have been listening to my show for a while are very familiar with her. I absolutely adore Sandy and her work, and I am taking one of her online classes at the moment. I have taken an in-person class from her before. I want to give her my personal endorsements. I think she's fabulous, and I think one of the best deals out in the universe is her VIP program, her VIP program, because for $200 a year, you have access to all the classes she's taught in the past that are all recorded, and you can go at your own pace. And once a month, you can get on the phone where she does an open call for everybody taking online classes, where you can ask any question on anything that you need more explanation on. I think it's one of the best deals in the universe. So she has taught many people whose names you'd probably recognize in this field, but really we just want to spend time with Sandy. So Sandy, welcome back. I'm so pleased to have you back on the show again.
And I'm super pleased to be here, Sharon. Thank you so much for having me once again. I love you. I love your audience. You just, you attract wonderful people, and I think that's just because you shine yourself so well.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. So we have a mutual admiration society going.
We definitely do.
Okay, so how does astrology fit into a spiritual path?
That's interesting, because there is, and I might be getting off topic a little bit here, but there's an entire branch of astrology which is called esoteric or sometimes spiritual astrology, that actually looks at a person's spiritual path that they will be on from incarnation, from the time they're born until death. So you can actually look at astrology strictly from a spiritual point of view. And for those people who are interested in it and finding out, well, why does all this happen to me? Why do I always seem to get refocused in this specific direction? What are my life lessons concerning this? You can actually use a spiritual form of astrology to pinpoint all of that information for someone. But for the average person who is not so, okay, well, spirituality is what my whole life is about, we can still benefit from the spiritual aspects of astrology, because astrology is going to be able to help you to identify your challenges as you move through life. It's going to identify your strengths. It's going to help you to understand the complexes that were in your early family and your early development. So it's a phenomenal tool for anyone who's interested in psychology. Sharon, not a lot of people know this about me, but when I lived on Long Island, I had many, many clients who, local psychologists, and remember back in the 1970s and early 80s, psychology really didn't want to know about anything psychic or astrology. It was we were the stepchild that they didn't talk about. And yet I still had many psychologists, doctorate and doctoral, medical doctor as well as doctoral psychologists, sending me their clients. And I would do the session, and I would record the session for the client. And then the client would take that recording back to their psychologist, and the psychologist was able to literally cut years of work with that client off because of being able to be pinpointed in the right direction through the astrological reading. And that's not made up. I really, really did that for many years. I still do that, although not to such a great degree as I did when I lived on Long Island.
I think that's incredible. I know that my dad is a physician, and my mom's best friend when I was growing up was an astrologer that actually was one that Hitler had not killed, one of the very few. And
wow.
When he was going to do really major surgeries on people, my mother would call her friend and say, here's the information on these patients. Give us good days to do the surgery.
I just had a client yesterday who has severe eye problems and called me looking for the best times over this next few months for her to be able to get eye surgery that could save her vision. So I know exactly what you're talking about. And now we're talking about medical astrology. So astrology really can be compartmentalized into many different fields. There's a psychological aspect to it. There is a medical aspect to it. There is a spiritual aspect to it. There is a financial aspect to it. You can really look at it and compartmentalize it into specific different areas. If you had a youngster who wanted to know what would be the best thing for them to enter as a field when they grew up and graduated school, you can look at astrology and you can give them, okay, if you go into this field, you have this talent, this ability that you could cultivate. You will have these challenges. This would be the life path that you'd have to follow if you wanted to make the most of it. You can actually do that with astrology.
Now, I did that for both of my children. And so from the time they were 2 years old, I led them in the direction that their astrology charts indicated that this, where they would want to go on their own. And just knowing that, I think, really helped them progress faster because they got the support they needed from very young in their age. So I want to recommend that for all parents out there that still have young kids at home. I think it's so important. And
I also have a client, I also have a client who owns his own company. And when he hires people, he asks for their birth date, not in a discriminatory way, but so that he can plot their astrology chart. And he puts people working in the right department, doing the right field, working with the people next to them that they work best with using astrology.
See, I think that is so cool. I was going to say, so I know a lot of people call me to find their purpose in life and the 7 things that they need to accomplish or learn or, or expand their knowledge of and able to meet their purpose. But astrology does that too, and in great depth.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I have people calling me all the time who say, this is what I want to be doing, but I keep hitting roadblocks. Maybe I did it well and it worked smoothly for 2 or 3 years, and now I'm hitting these roadblocks. Why am I hitting them? And so I can look at their natal astrology chart. That's the chart you get when you're born. It's kind of like a blueprint for life. And then I can put the transits of where the planets are right now around that chart. And I can even look at progressions, which talks about your evolution as you move through life into that chart. And I can explain to them from those couple of things why they're hitting a roadblock now, whether it's a temporary roadblock, whether it's going to go on, exactly how long it's going to go on for. I can say, okay, if you have two businesses, this one's going to be stalled until the end of the year, so you might as well put your energy into the other one. Then in January, pick this one up, and it'll move smoothly for you. Astrology.
See, I think all of that is amazing. There's so many benefits of astrology. And I think I'm an astrology junkie because I get my astrology done every year for good days to travel, not good days to travel, when to hold the workshops, when not. I mean, all of that. I just think it's so important. And so many really famous people throughout history have used astrology. And there's that saying that billionaires use astrology.
I absolutely believe that they do. I think at some point in time, everyone begins to realize that where the planets are is not an accident, and that they really do affect, kind of like the moon affects the tides of the waters. We can see that, so we know it's a fact. But all of the planets emit energy, and that energy, even the stars emit energy. And some astrologers work with stars. Some astrologers work with planets that are beyond the confines of our solar system. In my practice, I don't. I just work with the major, 9 planets that we have in our solar system. I don't work with the stars, but I do work a lot with eclipses. And I find that they have a very powerful impact upon people. So each astrologer is going to give a slightly different reading. As a matter of fact, all the way back in the early 80s, there was a study done. I thought this was absolutely fascinating. Francois Guaquelin ran the study. That's quite a famous astrologer statistically. And what he did is he took, I can't remember the number of people, but it was maybe 150 people. And he had very experienced psychologists work with those 150 people and do an evaluation of them. And then he had a group of very experienced astrologers also do an evaluation on those 150 people. And then he had a completely non-interested group put those results side by side and evaluate them. And what was interesting is that with no knowledge of who these people were, both groups, the psychologists and the astrologers, were able to come up with the profession, with the talents, with the abilities, with the, this one was a criminal. They were able to come up with all of this information, and it matched. They were the same.
See,
yeah, pretty amazing.
I think all of that is so fascinating. I just believe so thoroughly that we have been provided as a human race with so many ways of giving us, information. Like we have astrology, and we have namology, and we have tarot, and we have face reading and handwriting analysis. And it's like, if you've forgotten anything, I think start with astrology because that gives you such a thorough background, and then the other tools are just fascinating and interesting.
Astrology is the parent, the mother of all of those sciences. From what I understand, early books that I've read, is that astrology is actually mankind's oldest actual science. We find astrology in the pyramids. We find it all in every culture in the world. We find tracking of the planets. Ancient people did their planting by the stars. Many cultures still today get married based upon the compatibility of astrology charts. It's a science that gave birth to all of the other sciences. Whether you were talking about, mathematics, or whether you were talking about the chemistry and the blending of herbs or medicine, it all had its basis, the first science being astrology. And of course, somewhere in the Middle Ages, astrology became the stepchild, and astronomy became the way of looking at the stars. But astrology, as you know, it's still, for people who understand it, who work with it, it's an absolutely invaluable tool.
Well, see, I think in the Middle Ages is when they started plotting and planning for what's going on now in our society, but that's a whole other topic.
Oh, I agree.
In one of Sitchkin's books, Zachariah Sitchkin's books, when he's talking about Enki, that was later on called Thoth or however you pronounce Thoth. Sitchkin writes that he believed that Enki or Thoth brought astrology from his planet and reconfigured it so that it would be then working for the Earth, and that's how we got astrology. Have you ever read that anywhere else, or any of the history of how we got this to begin with?
No, I haven't. I haven't heard anything about that. But I do know that, like I said, there are literally charting of the stars that you can find cave drawings. So astrology goes back before the Egyptians. It goes back to mankind's earliest origins. As a matter of fact, there's a star, and I'm sorry I can't remember the name offhand, but it is not visible with the naked eye. And that star is plotted exactly where it would have been at the time, in a cave in Africa.
That's in the Dogon tribe.
Yes.
The Dogons did that, the Dogon tribe in Mali, Africa. I've been in those caves.
Wow.
And I've gotten to see that. And you're right, they plotted all kinds of stuff that our astronomers didn't see for years, but was already all on their caves.
And I don't know how many of your listeners are into past lives and reincarnation, but one of the earliest, I remember many of my past lives, so I'm a believer, and one of the earliest regressions I had it by somebody who was a hypnotherapist that was very good at it, was I was an astrologer. And it was all the way back in Mesopotamia. It was pre the Egyptian cultures. It was way, way back. And I was manually, I was living by myself on a mountaintop, and I was plotting the stars with a telescope that they said didn't exist back then, and I know it did. So, it's really, it's a very, very old science. And as I said, they used astrology to plant their crops. They used astrology to tell when to go to war. They used astrology to know how many children to have, what children should do what jobs. If you look at the kings and queens, which child was going to be the child to rule, which is kind of important, versus which child is the one that was going to go into the priesthood and be the social director, if you will, for the population. So it was really, astrology ran people's lives back then. And during the Middle Ages, I think, is when the fields separated. The plotting of the stars became astronomy. Okay, let's look where things are. And yet, there were very specific predictions back in the Middle Ages. For example, again, can't remember the name of the king, but one king, when he was a child, it was predicted that he would die on horseback with an arrow through his eye. And sure enough, he did. And he had his helmet on, he was jousting, and he had the visor down, and the joust went right through the visor, through his eye, he died. So, it's pretty amazing how specific back then some of the things that were predicted using astrology could be. And the thing is that as we got past the Middle Ages, those real specific predictions, unless they were mixed with psychic ability, which is something I also do, but unless the two things were together, mixed, the predictions were not as accurate once we got past those Middle Ages. And
let's talk about that when we come back from our current break. And we're going to talk also about how generic or specific astrology can be versus what you're reading in the papers versus what you get when you're getting your own chart done. Please stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Your conscious connection to a more mindful world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
I'm Kathy Williams, host of Sexy Mom Abundant Life radio show on Thursdays at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. On the show, we explore living abundantly in every area of your life. Ways to let go of limiting patterns and beliefs and to step into the flow of creativity and possibility, knowing you are supported by the universe.
Just by being here, you've shown that you are an action taker and committed to your own growth and transformation. You believe that within yourself, you have everything you need to fulfill your dreams and overcome your life challenges. But how do you access all that? Sandy Anastasi is a psychic, astrologer, coach, and creator of the Anastasi system of psychic development. She has your answers and a special offer for new clients and students. When you sign up for her free newsletter, you'll get a special gift that will help change your life, as thousands of people already have experienced. She will get you there. Go to www.sandyanastasi.com to sign up for Sandy's newsletter now.
These are the sounds of a dinner that almost didn't happen. A dinner now served, thanks to people like you. Due to COVID-19, 17 million more Americans may face hunger. Feeding America is helping our neighbors in need. And if you're able, you can too. Donations are being accepted at feedingamerica.org/coronavirus. Brought to you by the Ad Council and Feeding America, 200 food banks strong.
Welcome back to Luminescence. You're speaking with Sharon Lynn Wyeth, and our special guest today is Sandy Anastasi, whose website is her name. Sandy is spelt the normal way, S-A-N-D-Y, and Anastasi is A-N-A-S-T-A-S-I. And so it's sandyanastasi.com. And again, you can always go to knowthename.com, go to the schedule page, and look up today's date, which is July 8th. And you can read all of Sandy's contact information right there also, just in case you don't have a chance of writing it down right now. Okay, Sandy, so before the break, we were just starting to talk about how specific astrology was, but also what's the difference between that and how generic it can be? Because, you know, you read those astrological things in a newsletter or that's overall for, like, say, all of one sign. And yet, when you get an individual one done, it's quite different. Talk to us about that, please.
Well, let me preface that. What I was about to say before our break is that during the Middle Ages, astrology stopped being as specific. Now, we did have some astrologers. Nostradamus, for example, was an astrologer. Did you know that? So we had some astrologers who were doing some pretty specific predictions. But what began to happen is that those predictions that were most accurate were now being combined with psychism. The astrology-based predictions that were strictly based in astrology were not as specific. And people said, well, what's happening? And that's one of the reasons why astrology lost its place as being the very respected science and fell into a position behind astronomy and many other sciences. Here's the thing, though. What happened during the Middle Ages? People began to think for themselves. They began to be independent. They began to say, I can have self-determination. I can actually make choices. So you see, for the person who doesn't exercise choice, who just walks blindly along whatever life throws at them, we can still make very, very specific predictions based with astrology because that person doesn't exercise free will. But here in the 21st century, most people do exercise their free will, and the more self-directed, i.e. spiritual, a person becomes, the more difficult it is to predict for them specifically using just astrology. But when you combine astrology with psychism, with the psychic ability to know which path that person is going to choose out of the variables that are available to them, you can still be just as specific for that individual. Sharon, maybe this is a little macabre, but I've actually been able to predict the date that a person died. That's pretty specific. Okay?
You want to say, though, that's really helpful to some people. I know that my mom's best friend did that for my mom's sister, and because of that, Mom planned her trip down to where her sister lived and everything else so she would be there ahead of time to help her.
Exactly. And yet, I've got to say, now that I've said that, it doesn't always work. And the proof of that was my own mother. Okay, I use her as an example. The way you predict something like that is not to look at the death of the person in their own chart, because people don't see their own death. They only see whether they're hurting or whether they overcome. You look at the charts of all the other people in the family. And if you see a loss, if you see a struggle, if you see mom dying in 4 people in the family's charts, you know mom's going to go. Well, my mom made a liar out of that concept, because there were 3 times in her life that she was supposed to die. And it was very, very visible in all of our charts. And what happened each time is mom had another spiritual awakening, which is in itself a form of death. The last time she finally did die, and that was literally by her own choice. Okay, not that she committed suicide, but she had cancer, and there were experimental programs out there she could have gone into, and she was a fighter. She would have beat it, and she said, no, I'm tired, I'm ready to go. So it was literally by her own choice that she let go of life. So did astrology really work for her to predict things that specifically? Not the actual death, but it did predict the time that she was going to undergo a spiritual awakening. And these were major things. The first time she had a aneurysm burst in her brain and nearly died, and overcame that, and her whole personality changed. The second time, she was standing on the lawn when a car jumped the curb and came straight at her from about 20 feet away, 60 miles an hour. She should have died. Instead, she scooped up her dog, her neighbor's dog, football tackled her neighbor, and they all survived, and she became the neighborhood hero. That was another spiritual rebirth. It changed her personality again. And the third time, she really did die by her own choice. But all 3 times, she should have died physically. So deaths aren't always physical, and I think that's a very important message for people.
I have a question on that, Sandy. Is each time she changed her personality, could that also have been a time period where a walk-in came in?
I don't think so, but it certainly would be a possibility. And the reason I say I don't think so is I don't know how you feel about walk-ins, but if I encounter a walk-in, I treat it like a person is being invaded by a spirit that shouldn't be there, and I put that person out of my life, or I beat the crap out of that spirit and get rid of it, because I think walk-ins are not a good thing.
Interesting, and that's a whole other topic for us on another day. Do people benefit from knowing their astrology? I mean, isn't there a reason, or, because some people have nothing to do with it, and then they just go blindly through life. But is there a way, if you already know what the astrology indicates, that you have a chance to rise above it or improve it or make it better than it would have been?
Oh, absolutely. And Sharon, that's why after all these years, it's been 40 years since I actually have been practicing astrology professionally. And the very first step I took into astrology was when I was 14 years old. It's the thing I've been doing longer than anything else. And I'm not going to tell how much earlier that was, but it was a whole lot earlier. So it's 50 plus years that I have been studying and working with astrology. And in all that time, the thing that's made me come back to it over and over again is that it doesn't just show you the bad things. It doesn't just say, wow, this horrible thing's going to happen. It shows you the options you have to change yourself or change your life or grow, so that you can use that challenge to better your life, to put yourself into a better position instead of a worse position. So astrology is a phenomenal tool for self-growth.
You do a reading that you offer as a special once a year, and I know we're not in that section, but where you literally look at month by month and say, here's what your focus is this month or the following year, and here's what your next focus is, and you give a fabulous offering at that time. Would you want to talk to us about that so everybody can mark their calendars when to call to make sure that they call?
That reading will become available in December, and I launch it in January each year. And I make sure I cut it off by, at the latest, mid-March, because then too much of the year has gone by for it to be of value to people in terms of planning their year. But I call it my year at a glance reading. and it does give an overview of what the major lessons, if you will, the major focus of the year will be. And then it looks month by month. If you want to make the best of your year, make it work the smoothest for you, what are the things you should be working on, putting your attention into each month? Who are the people you're going to have difficulty with that you need to pay attention? It might surprise you. Sometimes people who have been easy to deal with suddenly become difficult to deal with. So it really helps you to get a handle on things. And incidentally, this works for people who run businesses too, because we can do an astrology chart on the business and actually look at how the business is going to flow through the year as well.
Well, Sharon, I happen to love that reading when you do that.
I wrote a book that I'd like to share the name of with your listeners. It's called Astrology, Art and Science, and it's a real important book. So it's available on Amazon. It's available on my website. If people take my VIP, I have a PDF of the original version of it that's in my VIP membership. Why do I quote that? It's not so much about future-oriented astrology. It's about each sign and each planet and each house in the astrology chart and what it actually means. And if people really read that book and really learn the material, they're going to be able to become an astrologer. The astrology is going to start to speak to them. It just makes so much sense. So I'm hoping that some of your folks who are listening, if they're interested in astrology, will pick that book up. And you can use it as a reference to understand all of the people in your life. So maybe when you read about your husband or your wife or your kids or your boss, you're going to understand them a little bit better and have a better relationship because of that. So it's a great place to start with your astrology. And Sharon has mentioned a couple of times, Sharon, you talked about the VIP. The only place that I have all of my that I have all of my astrology classes currently in is my VIP area. And that doesn't just contain my video classes like Astrology, Art and Science, or the beginner level astrology, or some of the other astrology programs I've done that are on video. It contains all of the audio programs that have been done since 1980. And there's enough material in there for someone like yourself, and I know you're currently doing this, to spend a whole lot of time. It could be about 1.5 years worth of study. And by the time you're done with those programs, studying at your own pace, by golly, you're an astrologer. You've got it down. It's literally a college education in astrology. And it can be had for $200 a year or $20 a month. You can pay it by the month. So it's pretty awesome.
I think it's an incredibly wonderful gift that you've given out to everybody. I tried learning astrology a while back. I took a year-long course, and the teacher wouldn't answer a question if it wasn't on the topic of the night. And I would be like, but until I get this question answered, I can't put the rest of this together. I've got floating pieces of a puzzle. They're not going together for me. Yeah. And it would have been taking him less time to just answer the question than it would have been to say, well, we don't get to that until lesson 8 or whatever he would do. And at the end of the year, I was so frustrated. And I'll tell you, Sandy, I love your book, Astrology, Art and Science, and all the things I've underlined in it. And for everyone who's interested in learning astrology, even at just the very basic level, it gives you so much insight. And Sandy's book is very clear and it's very succinct. And it goes together for people that have logical minds, and it's not just piecemeal. It's a fabulous book. I love this book because I'm actually learning from it.
I know you are. I can tell. And that's the book that I wrote first. Out of all the books I've written, I wrote that first. And I wrote it not because I wanted to be an author, but because I had a group of people studying astrology who wanted to learn it. And there just wasn't a book out there that put it together the way I needed it to be put together in order to teach it. So I wrote that book. And that book was originally handwritten on loose leaf paper, and then it went to being a typed version that I produced on my copy machine at work and gave to my students in a 3-leaf binder. And in fact, that version I have. There's a fairly well-known astrologer out of New York who was a child, and that book sat on his mother's coffee table because she was one of my students. And he learned astrology from that book when he was like 4 or 5 years old, learning to read.
Well, it's a nice building block. You build, you
Yes.
have a foundation, and you add to it. It's not, jumping all over. But anyway, as we're jumping all over right now, I would ask why it works. So we only have like 2 minutes before the break. But why does astrology work? What causes it to be so effective?
Oh, I don't think it works because of any, hocus pocus. I think it's a real thing. Just like we can physically watch the moon move the tides of the ocean, and that it does, it's so obvious because it's a close body. Every single planet reflects light, and we see the light, whether we're seeing it with our naked eye or through a telescope, we see the light come to our planet. So we know that the energy of that planet is coming to us. So the whole thing is, how do we know? I guess the real question here is, how do we know, for example, that Neptune rules your dreams? And I would say that that's because of, for many, many, many centuries, when Neptune was in a certain sign, people's dreams were all about a certain thing. So I suspect the way we learn to interpret how the planets are affecting us psychologically, emotionally, physically, is through observation. But the fact that they affect us, frankly, all you have to do is open your eyes and see them, and you know that you're affected by light. Light is energy. If those light waves hit the earth, it's affecting you.
I was just reading recently that I was reading something about Yeshua ben Joseph, and it said in there that he was as effective as he was because he only recognized that light was true. And just like the plants, they only recognize that light is true and they feed off of light. And he would only recognize that light was true. And so we are getting light from the different planets. So yeah. I thought interesting correlation. We will be right back after this next break, and we're going to start talking specifics of astrology just to give you a little bit of a clue on what we're really talking about with the different planets. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
A conscious lifestyle for a mindful life. OMTimes Radio. IOM-FM. Host your show on IOM-FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM-FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of OMTimes Magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going On? My passion is sifting through information, research, and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers, and researchers pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics, and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
Mark Twain said the two most important days in your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why. The why is hidden in your name. Sharon Lynn Wyeth has created a scientific way of deciphering your name to reveal your contract for this lifetime. And your name even specifies the 7 areas that are subsets of your soul's overall goal. Your name identifies who you are to both yourself and others. What does your name say about you? Contact Sharon Lynn Wyeth at info@knowthename.com for your stunning name review.
The United States has the highest rate of incarceration in the world. At the Equal Justice Initiative, we believe mass incarceration has to end. There is this presumption of dangerousness and guilt that gets assigned to Black and brown people. We have to confront our history of racial injustice and commit to a new era of truth. There's something better waiting for us, something that feels more like freedom. Truth can inspire change. Please learn more at eji.org.
Welcome back to Luminescence, Common Sense Spirituality. You are with Sharon Lynn Wyeth, and our special guest today is Sandy Anastasi, and her website is her name. Sandy is spelled S-A-N-D-Y, and Anastasi is A-N-A-S-T-A-S-I. So it's sandyanastasi.com. And of course, sometimes people will email me and say, okay, how do I get a hold of her? And you are more than welcome to do that. If that makes it easier to email me at info@knowthename.com, then do that, and I'm happy to pass along Sandy's information. Sandy, as we're looking at things, does the sun, everybody pretty much knows their sun sign. I mean, even if they don't believe in astrology or understand its worth, they pretty much know that their sun sign and what it is. And does the sun sign represent the constellation we were born under or something else?
As usual, you open a can of worms. And you don't even know that you do. You just managed to put your finger right on a sensitive subject. What's interesting is in today's world, we use 12 signs. We arbitrarily divide the astrology chart into 12 different houses as well. But that's not what there was originally. Originally, there were several more signs. And then during the Middle Ages, everything got divided up differently, and a couple of those signs went away. So realize that the signs themselves are real. You can actually look at the star constellations along the horizon as you look around. If you had a telescope, even without it, with your naked eye, you can see the astrological sun signs. They will always be close to the horizon. And then you would divide the heavens up into houses, and the division of houses is man-made. That's arbitrary. But there were originally 2 more signs, and those signs were combined into those 12 signs. But they are physical, they are real. Now, once you know your sign, the signs are divided up into qualities and into elements that would talk about how those qualities are represented, okay? And that gives each person a real good understanding of who they are. So, one of the things your listeners, if they ever come into my psychic hour that I do once a month, I work with a horary chart on the psychic hour. And I'll say, okay, if you're, for example, as you are, you're a Libra, if you're an air sign, and the air signs are Libras, Aquarians, and Geminis, these things are going on with you. Now, I'm taking 3 whole groups of signs, and yet I'm able to give some pretty darn specific information about what's going on with them because I've got the astrology chart there to see in that moment where the transiting planets are affecting people of those air signs. Am I making sense to you?
Yes.
It's hard to do this verbally without pointing at a chart. Okay?
Well, that's because you and I are visual learners.
Yeah. Well, I'm sitting here, if you could see me, I'm sitting here drawing pictures in the air with my fingers, and I'm thinking to myself, I wonder if your listeners are visualizing these pictures I'm drawing. It's kind of funny. The thing is that the more specific you get, the more with seeing the whole chart, seeing all the different planets, because it's not just about your sun. It's about, your sun represents the soul coming into life and having its experience here. So is the soul going to be an air sign like you, a Libra, or me, a Gemini? Is the sun going to be a cardinal sign, which is a self-starter like you? Or a Gemini like me who kind of likes to stir the pot until somebody says, well, we need to do that then. Okay, that's a mutable sign. Or is somebody going to come into life, if they're an air sign, as an Aquarius that says, heck, if it's not broken, don't fix it. Let's just keep things the way they are. So, you see, we can look at the quality of that sign and know more about the person, even though that you're an air sign. There are 3 air signs, and each one of those air signs acts a little bit differently. So even with the sun, looking at just a sun sign, we can get a really good feel for how you're going to act, or whether there are going to be stable things going on in your life if the sun's passing through a certain sign. That we call that a transit. But even then, we can be so much more specific when we go into looking at the actual time and date of someone's birth. because then we can know where their moon was. And the moon represents a person's emotional states, and it's the personality patterns that they bring into life with them. If we know where their Mars is, we will know how they act. If we know where their Saturn is, we're going to know what their life lessons are and what kinds of resistance they're going to encounter, especially during their early years, the challenges that are going to be around them. So the more of the planets that we add into the chart, the more definitive information we're going to have. When we look at what I call the natal chart, that's just the planets where they were in that blueprint for when you were born, i.e. you slipped out of mom's womb, and in that moment we cast a chart, and that's where the planets were, and that becomes your blueprint for your personality for life. It tells me how you're going to react to things, what kinds of things are going to interest you, what kinds of things you're going to be good at, what kinds of people and situations are going to give you a problem, and what kinds of things you're going to be able to give back to the world. So I'm going to know all those things about you just looking at your natal chart. And then we look at your transits, where the planets are now, and put them against that natal chart, and I know what's being activated. So is your problem with authority being activated? And is that going to happen this month? Oh dear. Be careful. Either take a vacation now, or if you get into a confrontation with the boss, keep your mouth shut. It'll get you into trouble. We can be that specific.
You know, I always think that astrology, out of all the tools that we've been gifted with, astrology does timing better than any other tool. Would you agree with that?
Oh, I absolutely do agree with you. Absolutely. I work with my guides as a psychic a lot because I'm a psychic channel. And my guides give phenomenal information, and they can be very, very specific about things, but they're terrible about timing. So they could be specific about something that's going to happen in your life in 10 years. Okay? But you want to know what's going on in your life right now. So one of the things that I love is that my guides, a while back, my guides turned into being astrologers. So I got into a group of guides that are actually astrologers. So I work with the astrology chart. So real time, I'm looking at timing. And then I get the specific information that's being delivered to me from my guides. So I kind of get it both ways. So that's why it's difficult for me to say I'm an astrologer specifically, because I'm also a psychic. And when I work with astrology, no matter how hard I try to be an astrologer, that psychic ability sneaks in. Okay?
Well, you know, I think that's why Hitler wanted, his plan was to kill all the astrologers, but he ended up not killing just a few, less than a handful. And I think that was because they were psychic astrologers.
Well,
and he wanted to be able to use their...
coming. So, yeah, and I don't know if you're aware of it, but the United States back during World War II actually hired an astrologer. His name was Sidney Omar, so that he could, not because they never said, we believe in astrology. They hired this astrologer. He was really on the United States payroll. And his job was to tell them what Hitler's astrologer was going to be advising him to do next.
I think that is so cool. Well, you know, Benjamin Franklin was our first really renowned astrologer that helped set up the United States, or the States of America, as that is what we were called back then.
Yeah.
So, Sandy, since we're so short on time, would you tell us one more time how to get a hold of you and any last comments that you'd like to make?
Your listeners can find me at www.sandyAnastasi, and you spelled the name SandyAnastasi.com. You can also get in touch with me through my assistant. That's Lisa, Lisa, for Sandy Anastasi, at AOL.com. So if you want an email, that's the place to email. And you can visit me on my psychic hour. It's free once a month. And of course, you can visit me on my show with Sharon that I do on odd months. So I'll be back in September.
I love that. Really quickly, yes or no, is there astrology in the great beyond or just on the different planets? Do you know?
Oh, no. There's a whole field of esoteric astrology that actually looks at the versions of the planets that are on the higher levels. Everything, just like you and I, exist on all the planes in the universe at the same time. That's another subject, isn't it? So do the planets.
Yes.
So yes, astrology goes all the way back, all the way to the top of creation. Sharon, I want to also make a quick mention. I have a retreat coming up in September, from September 27th to October 3rd on Sanibel Island in Florida. And folks, Sharon is going to be there talking about nemology, and I'm going to be there talking to dead people and giving messages, and we're going to have a psychic fair, and we're going to have a wonderful, wonderful experience with a group of psychics on the beach in this wonderful, wonderful place called Sanibel Island. So if you're interested, you can find out all about that on my website too, and you can find out how to register.
And I am so looking forward to that, Sandy. I think it's going to be so much fun. I invite all of you that are listening. And wonderful Florida is easy to travel in, and the weather will be gorgeous at that time, not too hot, not too cold. Not that it ever gets too cold in Florida, but definitely not too hot. So again, you can get a hold and get more information about the retreat and her VIP program and her classes going on and her psychic hour, and so much is all available. And you can contact Sandy through her website, which is her name, SandyAnastasi. Thanks, Sandy, for joining me again. I loved having you on. Next week, we have Sherry Anshara will be back with us next week, and we're going to be talking about wordology and the importance of what we say and how we say it, and what are the hidden meanings in some of the words that we use. And just to look at words, just like blessing, or the word bless is really a be less, if you look at it that way. So we're just going to be tearing words apart next week, and that ought to be an interesting show also. As always, this is, I am so appreciative of all of you coming and joining us, and this is Sharon Lynn Wyeth signing off.
She remembers so long ago, gazing in the mirror, an image of an angel smiling back at her. No wounds or imperfections, just beauty and its glow. Her laughter and her heart, a reflection of her soul. And I want to shine like the sun and smile to stop the rain. And I want to dance with the wind and believe in dreams again. When the paintbrush of life stroke the canvas of her, the light slightly dimmed, her reflection unseen, and all that she knew, and all that would be, it vanished like the sun rays on a shimmering sea.